in Blast Forum. I just wanted to do a quick video since I have this thing all apart on something called chain stretch. Basically what chain stretch is, if you ride your quad, dirt bike, or whatever you own that has a chain on it, you'll notice that after a while the chain starts to get pretty loose on it. And then you have to go and tighten the rear axle, or the carrier. That is known as chain stretch. And basically, chain stretch, the way the term is said, is not what you think it is. Your chain is not physically stretching out. Let me get a seat here. What's really happening is that the front sprocket is wearing much quicker than the rear sprocket. And the main cause of that is because that front sprocket on my quad is a 13 tooth, the rear is a 40 tooth, and if you divide those two numbers you get something like 3.04 or something like that, which means this sprocket on one tooth has to turn 3.04 times for that sprocket to move one time around. So it's a pretty big ratio. So that is doing 3 times more rotating than the rear axle is. And that's why your front sprocket wears more than your rear sprocket. It's because of that. That's ultimately turning 3 times less than that one is. So with the excessive turning, what's going on is that these teeth are wearing out quicker. Let's see if I can focus. The teeth are wearing out quicker. And when they wear out quicker, basically metal is getting shaved off and it's creating space between the teeth. So if you look over here, if you look on the rear axle, or the rear sprocket, where the chain is, if this would focus, the space between that roller and where the tooth's been in is almost perfect. Now, when the chain rotates around a bunch of times and the sprocket, that tooth in the middle starts to wear down, and your chain is able to move back and forth on the tooth. And then that's what creates the looser tension on your chain. So that's why like the chain sags a lot or whatever after a run or something like that, is because it wears down a lot. So the sprocket wears, and it's normally on the front sprocket. Like the rear sprockets usually look the same as the day you put them on, if you replaced them when you should. And the other thing that causes chain stretch is all these little rollers. Basically, inside them are all ball bearings, and they're all able to roll freely. I'm not going to be able to show you that. Actually, over here I will. So like this one right here, it's able to roll freely. And the reason for that is it creates less friction and it enables the chain to move better. Now also, these roller bearings, as the chain rotates, is getting worn down a lot more. So they're wearing down, and that creates more play for it to back play in the entire the system. So when you hear someone talk about chain stretch, it's not your physical chain stretching out longer. Sometimes people will lay their old chain next to a new chain and it'll be a crap load longer or something like that. And in reality, it's because they probably bought a different chain that's either has more or less links in it. Now granted, your chain will physically stretch a little bit, because with all rotating forces, there is something called as friction. And the friction heats up the metal, and the metal expands. And it expands in all directions where it's coming from. So that includes out this way, sideways, diagonal, whatever the hell it wants to go. And as you're running a lot, these teeth are rolling up on the top of those rollers and are slipping off, grabbing on, and slipping off through the entire cycle. The front one 3 times as much as the rear one. That's why your front sprocket wears more. So that's causing friction, and ultimately friction heats up the metal, causing the chain to expand. Now as it cools down, it contracts. But a lot of times, because of the tension on the tires and the ground and all the different forces that your chain is seeing while you're riding, the expansion is almost permanent. But the expansion of the chain from the stretch that it gets is so minuscule that you don't notice it. It's mainly because it's wearing down. So when people lay their chains next to each other and say, "Oh, well, look at this one; it's longer than this one," it's because they got more links in their chain and they haven't noticed it or something of the sorts. I got a chain. I'll pause the video and I'll get it out. I have my stock chain from 2001 in both stock sprockets, and I'm not going to take this one off because it's too much work. But I'll show you what that one looks like compared to this one, and you can see what I mean by that. I'll be right back. Alright, YouTube, I'm back. So I got my old chain and the old sprocket, and before I show you that, I just want to go over real quickly again what it is. So, in brief description, this sprocket is turning, depends on your ratio, it's turning 3 times faster than the rear sprocket. And with that 3 times faster, this sprocket wears more, the chain wears more, causing more space in between the links. And that causes it to stretch, basically. So the chain sags when it does that. And that's why you have to go and tighten your rear sprocket. Before I show you that again, the best way to prevent chain stretch is by putting a lubricant on your chain. That'll reduce the friction and ultimately make your chain sprockets last a lot longer. Also, O-ring chains, this is the one I'm going to show you, also helps with it, so you don't have to replace them as quickly. But it does rob some of your power coming from the engine, as it takes more energy to spin through its cycle because it's a stiffer chain. But all around, if you're trail riding and stuff like that, go for the O-ring. It'll last a lot longer through the water, the rocks, everything like that. But if you're racing, go for like an X chain, or this is an RK chain. It's a basically it's just a giant bicycle chain. There's nothing different about it. And if you clean it every time and you lube it up, you should be good. For lube, I just use WD-40. Because I usually lube it after every 1 or 2 runs that I use, and I clean it after every race that I have. So I keep pretty good care of it. So I'll show you my stock chain and sprockets that I had on this quad from 01 when it was purchased, not by me. So I'll show you the rear sprocket first. If you take a look at this rear sprocket, you can see right down here that some of the teeth are worn kind of unevenly. Like it's much sharper. Like if you put your finger on it, it's like a blade almost. It looks like. If you compare that to these teeth are much thicker, and there's less space in between from center to center. Also, the tips of these are rounded off. And that's what also causes the chain stretch. Is the chain comes around and slides off the sprocket to come back forward to the front chain. It wears the tips of the teeth down, and then starts wearing them down even more and more and more. And sometimes they'll just break off. So if you look at the difference, compare between the two, stupid case. That one compared to that one. I'm going to show you side by side. So you can see, I can't really do this too well without it distorting the way I want it to look. So you can see, it looks like this sprocket has a lot more space in between it than that sprocket. That's because of wear, obviously. And since it's from 01, it has been ridden for I don't know how many years, it does some damage after a while. Now for this front sprocket. Now, like I said, front sprocket gets the most abuse because it's turning 3 times faster than the rear one if you have my ratio, which is 13 to 40. Technically, if you want to get a bigger sprocket, like a 1440, it'll wear a little bit less because it's doing like 2-something rotations for that one to turn once. So it might wear less, but the significance of it is it's not, one tooth is not going to make a big deal. It's you know, like I said, best way to prevent chain wear is to take care of it and lube up your chain every time you're done with it. Sorry about the case. So here's the front sprocket. if you notice right off the bat, it looks like a ninja star. And the reason why that is that it sits on the sprocket like this, and it's turning this way. So what's happening is when the chain catches on it, where's my finger, and it starts to turn, it starts to create these rounded edges over here, and the bottom, where is it? Yeah, the bottom creates like the ninja star kind of look. So it rounds these off while it keeps these mostly the same. And if you notice, look at the space. I can fit my whole finger in here. The whole roundness of my finger, and I have a pretty fat finger, into this one spot. And in there, where is it? There's between two teeth, and there's between two teeth. Look at that one compared to that one. The difference is huge, and it's a little distorted in the camera. It doesn't look like ridiculous, but that's why chain stretch happens, because this metal wears down a lot. It's not your physical chain stretching beyond anything. And now if I were to put this sprocket in here, you can see how much room it has to wiggle around in between the sprockets, or in between the rollers on the chain. It's because this is huge. Now if you roll this back and forth, it has no movement back and forth, because that sprocket, those sprockets are in for that chain. They wear evenly together. Now if I put this chain on this, it's gonna still have a bit of wiggle room back and forth, but it's nothing like that chain. That chain is not worn nearly as much as this one. So that's the main difference, is your front sprocket. So I'll put that away. Now for the chain. This chain is a 92 link, I believe. It's a stock blaster chain, and that one's a 92. And also, if you notice, the reason why O-rings are harder to turn is because they weigh ridiculously heavy. This probably weighs about 8 pounds, 9 pounds, 10 maybe, if that. So it's pretty heavy. Now if you look at the chain, between the links right here, it's quite a big space. Enough for those to fit between, hence, I'll get to that later, for those sprockets to fit between. So as these balls wear, right here, focus, there we go, kind of. As the balls wear, they start to basically create more space in between, and that makes your chain sag a lot more. If you look on here, this chain is new, by the way. I just bought it this season, and I have, I believe, how many runs do I have on it? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days of running on it. 3 practices, 2 running days. If you look in between there, look at the space from there. It's not that much. Actually, it's exactly the space of the teeth on the sprockets. That's why they mate. Here, it's insane. If I were to put this chain on those sprockets, not only would it probably not fit with the carrier all the way out to its maximum, but it's going to be slipping teeth and doing all kinds of crazy things, and probably popping off and going into my case and trenching the case. Which I did have happen to me. That's why I replaced that chain right away after that happened. Because if it goes inside the case, you have a lot of problems with it. So now, one thing that people don't realize is that as soon as you put a chain and sprockets on a quad and ride it around for even 100 feet or whatever, this motor is not running, as you can see, but stock motor puts at around 15 to 17 horsepower. That's 15 to 7 horsepower coming onto these sprockets and chain. Now, doesn't seem like a lot, but when you look at it, it is a lot. And then that creates stress on the chain, and it starts wearing it right away off the bat. Wearing a little bit. I mean, you're not going to notice it, but it does start wearing it. And it starts to mate the chain and the sprockets together. And that's why... so they mate together, and then what people always wind up doing, want to replace their chain and sprocket, but they're taking the cheap side out, and they're like, oh, well, you know, the front sprocket looks like this, the back sprocket looks completely fine. Why don't I just replace the front sprocket? And the reason is because if you just replace the front sprocket, the teeth on the new front sprocket are going to be closer together because there's no wear on them. The chain is going to be further apart because there's wear on them in the links, and same with the rear one. So with this being closer and those being farther apart, as this rotates and pull it, it's going to be hopping links and hopping teeth. Just to try to get a grip, and you're going to be breaking teeth and your chain's going to be popping off. So as soon as you put that chain on and you ride it around your backyard, they're on there until you decide to take them off and replace them as a set. You have to replace them as a set. It's pretty much the #1 reason for chains popping off and embedding themselves in the case and having a leak in the case then, because of that. So make sure you replace your sprockets and chain both together at the same time. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Then again, these are two really far away scenarios. That is almost a brand new chain. Like I said, I only have like 5 rides on it. This chain has been on and sprockets have been on since '01, and they're really worn. Surprised the teeth hasn't been broken. But I swear to God, like this thing you can throw and it'll stick into the wall. That's how bad it is. And it doesn't really look it on camera, I guess. But they're pretty bad. And the only reason why I kept it is because, God forbid, something happens where I'm at a race or whatever, you can stick them on, and you can run a race, or you can stick them on just to get home. It's not going to hurt anything that bad, but it's not recommended. Like, you shouldn't do it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I said, chain stretch isn't your physical chain stretching. It's so microscopic that you probably wouldn't even notice it. It's just the wear that's happening between the sprockets and the rollers on the chain. And that's what's causing the sag, and that's eventually what causes the teeth to wear and the chain to pop off, and you running out of room to get to do those. And granted, when you add environmental factors, rocks, sand, stuff like that, it just makes it 3 times worse. So that's why chains usually don't last a long time unless you take good care of them. If you're getting an O-ring chain like that one, I'm going to show you the difference between O-rings and regular chains. O-rings, if you look, they have little black, where is it? In between the outside links and the inside links, right there, they have a little black O-ring, and they're meant to seal oil in there or something of the sort in there, and keeps dirt out of the ball bearings and stuff. So if you're using one of those for trail riding or whatever, put a good grease on it, but try to find something that won't stick to dirt and the dirt will just fall off of it, or that if you do use it and dirt does get on it, you can take a hose and it'll just wash it all right off. Try to find something like that. It'll last you a lot longer and you'll be much happier. These chains, like I said, they're just like regular bicycle chains. There's nothing special about them. Easy to turn, they're pretty lightweight. So one of the things you may ask is, how come it doesn't happen on a bicycle? And the factor is, it does. But it's so microscopic that you don't notice it at all, and you don't have to replace the chain on a bike for the entire life of the bike because, well, one, the sprocket in the front is much more proportional to the back, so it's close to a 1-to-1 ratio, very close. I don't have any bikes in here other than my motorized one, which I'll show you the difference on. And you're not putting out a constant power with your feet. Motors put out a constant power, and the friction just keeps building up. Your feet don't do that. If you look at my motorized bike, this engine's a 50cc engine. On this chain that I have right here, I forgot what the ASI is on it, or ANSI, something like that. But if you look closely, it does start to show some wear signs. On the front, definitely it's starting to get the Ninja Star effect. Right there. And on the back, and back not so much. Definitely probably on that front sprocket, considering that's an 8-tooth, and that's a 40-tooth, or whatever the hell it is. So what I mean by the gear ratio, sorry about my crappy weld job, that was my first weld I ever did. But this is turning that many times, but look how many times the front one is turning. a bunch more times. I forgot, I think this is 7 and this is either 40 or 80 or 62, so I don't remember which. If you divide those two numbers, you get like a 5 or something like that. 5 ratio, which means that it has to turn 5 times fully around for this to turn once. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's 5 or 7 or something like that. So that creates excessive wear and stuff like that. So basically, the further your gear ratios are apart, the less chain wear you'll have, but you don't want to do that in a sense because then you have no power. That's pretty much it. I mean, there's nothing much to it. The chain pops off once or twice. Sprockets look bad, chain looks bad. Replace the whole set. It's for $30. It's worth it. Because that way you don't have to buy a new bottom end or a case or damn phone case, and or anything like that. Any questions, comments, or anything like that, feel free to ask. That's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.